As it should.
That voice is so disturbing.
For posterity's sake. Love. Awesome. Welcome everybody to the room, the San Diego Zoom room. We are happy to have you here. We'll get started, and in case anybody joins us, they can catch up. But I am Danielle Ward, an Associate Artistic Director and the Literary Manager at San Diego Rep. And I am so happy to be here tonight with these two beautiful people. I go by the pronouns she and her. And before we kick off tonight, I just want to first acknowledge that San Diego Rep's home, the Lyceum Theater, is built on the traditional lands of the Ipai Tipai Kumeyaay Nation. And we also want to recognize their neighbors in our region, the Payacowichum, Coahuila, and Capeño peoples. San Diego Rep honors the over 2,000 current tribal members living in our area and elevates local elders, past, present, and future. We are very grateful to these community members for their tremendous contributions to our region and thank them for their continual stewardship. And also in this online space, we would like to uplift and offer respect for Indigenous peoples from the lands in which you are all joining us from virtually. Today, I am thrilled to be here with a playwright who has earned the moniker America's Most Produced Playwright, Lauren Gunderson, and the very crazy talented, classically trained actor, William DeMeritt, to talk about a very relevant right now play called The Catastrophist, which is streaming online if you haven't seen it yet at San Diego Rep through July 11th. It is certainly a must-see. For those who haven't experienced yet, I'll give you a little background information. The play is a one-person show featuring virologist Nathan Wolfe, who has been named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world for his work tracking viral pandemics. It's a personal story that is beautifully presented as cinematic digital theater that tracks, as he tracks threats that come from within and also without. It is a brilliant, wryly witty, and warm look at the thrill of discovery, whether it's a new virus or the treasures of your own family. So if that didn't get you to want to dial in and go see it right away, I don't know what will, maybe this conversation. Before I jump in asking some questions, I wanted to give both of you a chance to share something about yourself. Can be background highlights and or maybe some things that you are excited about right now. So instead of me going through the list of bio, I thought I'd give you the opportunity to shine a little bit yourself.
Hi, Lauren Gunderson, she, her, hers pronouns. I'm coming to you from San Francisco, which is unceded Ohlone land. I'm just so delighted to be here. I'm such a fan of San Diego Rep and all you do for American theater, commissioning and developing and premiering new plays. It's just the greatest. And I imagine your audience is also the greatest. So really pleasure to be in your company. Yes, so I'm in San Francisco. There is the chance that one or both of my young children will come through that door at any moment. So just keep it spicy. You know, who knows? And yeah, I am a believer in the power of storytelling, the necessity of storytelling, and the communion of storytelling that we are, when we come together, whether digitally, as we have had to in this moment, or in person, which I can't wait to. I haven't seen my first play yet back in person, but I'm very close and I can't wait. You know, it's a magical, important civilization building thing that we do, making theater for and with each other. So that's the thing I could talk about the most in the world, and the thing that gets me up in the morning is telling stories and making them meaningful and lasting. So that's me.
Amen. Yes.
Hi there. I'm William DeMeritt, also known as Bill. I apologize in that apparently my internet connection is unstable. So I may lose audio. So you may say something and I may not hear it. Or I may say something and you may miss it, but it probably won't be that important. I'm usually in New York, sometimes Los Angeles. I'm currently in San Diego at my father-in-law's house. And this is Art by his brother. So Yeah, what can I don't know. I'm an actor. I'm a writer. I'm passionate about storytelling. I'm passionate about justice. I'm a huge nerd, which actually ties in with the justice thing if you think about it. And I'm really constantly honored and thrilled to be in the presence of Lauren Gunderson. So there you go. And thank you very much, San Diego Rep, for having me.
Awesome. All right. I look forward to the point where we can gather all together. But in the meantime, it's kind of nice to like be invited into your homes. It's like a little fly on the wall kind of thing. So art and books and stuff included. So thank you. Okay, well, I want to kick off by asking some questions, and then if other folks who are listening have something they want to ask, throw it in the chat so that we can pick some of those as well. But Lauren, I wanted to start by asking, I know you're the playwright at residence at the Marin Theater Company, and it's my understanding that when the pandemic hit, the artistic director there, Jason, at Marin, knew that you're married to a virologist and sort of approached you with this whole idea about this piece. So I'm curious to know why you decided to write this piece and if there's any future goals that you have now that it's out there and being shared with folks.
Yeah, I mean, it was at first I rejected the idea. Like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to write about my husband. It's a terrible idea. It's kind of like cardinal rule of being married to a writer is that ideally you don't write about the person you're married to, but then who wrote that rule? And you know, but the moment we were in, a couple of things occurred to me. Some very obvious, like here we are in a pandemic. My husband is a specialist in pandemics, not just viruses, but viral pandemics.
Yeah.
So something that's a very big thing. And I have visceral memories of in January of 2020, waking up and him just already reading the paper and looking at the science. And I could tell it was unlike anything I'd seen in 10 years of marriage to him, his reaction to the news coming out of China and realizing like, this is different. He is nervous by this. And of course, looking in retrospect, it's pretty chilling to think about. I remember sending text to a bunch of people going like, Nathan's getting nervous. So like take some Purell with you if you're flying. So, but the other thing that occurred to me is when this all started and the writing of this wasn't until probably April or May in that fateful year, you know, what we were thrust into was a very emotional intimacy. Like we still are in this Zoom world. Like this is my office. These are my books. This is my children or my cat may join me at any moment. And that to me allowed me to think, well, maybe this is the time for something really intimate, for something really up close and personal and kind of brazenly intimate. And so a one-person show about somebody I love felt like maybe this is the thing. At first I thought, oh, is it too obvious to write about a pandemic specialist in a pandemic? And then once I decided, for those of you who haven't seen it, the play is not about COVID. So it's not about this pandemic, which hopefully you will bring your now knowledge of this pandemic with you to the show. So I actually didn't have to write that because we are all going to bring it with us. So anyway, it was more this idea of we are all stuck in our homes, unless we are essential workers, and thank God for them. We are stuck in our homes with our families, just thinking about big things, and it's harrowing outside, and this new way of being with ourselves and thinking through our life and how we got here. And, you know, so that's the stuff of plays. That's the stuff of certainly one-person plays. So I did ask permission from Nathan to write it, even though if he said no, I probably still would have written it anyway, but I would have apologized. But yeah, it was an act of intimacy between he and I as well, which we can talk about too. But yeah, I ended up with something that again is not specifically about this pandemic, but is about regret and family and resilience and knowing the things you love before you lose them, as well as after, and knowing how strong we have to be to get ready for whatever is coming.
Wow. Absolutely. That's a lot. I can't imagine watching somebody else who is an expert in pandemics start the process of getting nervous. William, I have a question for you. I feel like this play asked for you to do a deep dive into sort of scientific details and knowing a lot, as I'm sure I'm I'm sure the research requires. But you also it seemed to force you to face a lot of fears about mortality as the character does. So given this moment in time that you are doing this, right, with everything that's happening all around you with COVID and the reality of life, how did you kind of tackle this role?
Wow. Yeah, I'm not going to be nearly as eloquent and easy to understand as Lauren. And again, forgive me if the audio goes, just like raise your hand or something. They're sort of, there's the global and the personal for me in this, and there's overlap, but just for sake of my brain, it's easier to keep track of them that way. Lauren and I forged a friendship over the earlier part of COVID, trying to come up with a way to address this new intimacy that everyone has, this boundary to unboundaried intimacy. And like a lot of artists, maybe all the artists, we were kind of just going crazy, needing to express, needing to create, missing that electricity and intimacy and craziness of creating with other people, you know. So the Catastrophist, after, I don't know, however many months, most of the year, without really being around people and without creating anything with other people, it was a wonderful outlet, both for that need and for that anger and for that frustration and for that sadness. And I give a lot of credit. Pardon me, Jason was, out of the playwright, actor, director group, Lauren was, and our dramaturg even, were always remote, right? So Jason was in the theater with me. He and the our DP and his two assistants, and that was, you know, we had a COVID compliance officer and like a couple people helping us backstage, but in terms of people that would give me creative feedback, Jason was the only one that was there. And he did a great service to me, and he was able to talk me down off some ledges, because there was a lot of anxiety. I mean, stage fright is one thing, but I've been very fortunate to work a decent amount over the last few years, and to be back on stage was both thrilling and also like, oh my God, what do I do? Do I know how to do this? And then to do a play in front of no one, that's not something I had done. I've done a one-man show, done film, but I haven't been on stage for nobody doing such an intimate play. And you know, as Lauren has said, and if you was intimated, we all got to be varying degrees of educated about science and pandemics during this time. And most of us at this point have like that unhealthy degree where it's of knowledge, which is just a little bit more than a layman, but not actually enough to know what the fuck you're talking about for most people. And in this, I got to go a little bit more towards knowing what the fuck I was talking about. And I got to read Nathan's book and have some conversations with him and some conversations with Lauren, which are sometimes extended conversations like via Nathan, and just really deep dive, which gave me comfort. Yeah, knowledge is power. But Nathan and I also have a lot of surprising overlap in our personal stories. And I'm however old I am, but I'm an orphan. My parents are dead. My mom died in 2009 and my dad died when I was 8, and I'm an only child. And this story obviously, well, for those of you who haven't seen it, deals with mortality and someone close to Nathan, you know. So there was a lot of overlap there that was, I don't know how to phrase it. I was surprised with how easy it was, not comfortable, right? But how easy it was to tap into some of those things. I got in touch with my spirituality a lot over the apocalypse. And I, you know, maybe had some conversations with my mom and dad that I wouldn't normally have had. And this was a way to kind of tap into some of that. So
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love the spiritual journey, right? That I think we're all sort of being pushed on at this moment to expand our ideas. I want to follow up with you, William, just to ask, because you kind of got into it a little bit, but have you ever portrayed a real person before? Like you said, you've done one person shows before. Have you done that? And if so, or if not, we're like, what did you learn from it? Because it seems like, he sits in the audience and now he gets to see a sort of kaleidoscope version of himself on the stage, which is embodied by you. And yeah, so what was that like?
So a lot of my onstage career actually has surprisingly involved portraying actual humans
Okay.
who have lived or are alive. So the one-man show that I wrote it's the only one-man show I wrote. And it's autobiographical, but the character of me is not in it. But lots of people from my life are.
Gotcha.
And a lot of them are alive, and a lot of them came to see the show. And my very close friend, Jill, who was like my best friend at grad school, she knew I was writing her in the show. She came to see the show and she goes, "We're still friends, but we have to talk."
No pressure.
And but I know Lauren because of OSF, and at OSF I played William Shakespeare, who he was alive, and I've also played a Yiddish author named Sholem Asch, who was one of the main characters in Indecent by Paula Vogel. The thing with playing those people is that they're long dead,
Right.
and we don't really have a lot of what they were like.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're kind of mythological.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Shakespeare is, he's an adjective, right? He's a legend. So, maybe some people go like, "Oh, well, Shakespeare wasn't black." And I go, "Well, do you know that for sure?" Like maybe a little bit. I don't know. So there's pressure to honor the legacy, sort of, but you always should have respect for the characters you're playing, even if you're playing like the shittiest person who's ever lived. You have to, you can't judge them and play them, right? You can judge them when it's done. Playing Nathan is different because Nathan is very much with us, and he's very well known, and there's lots of him on the internet. And also, he's the family of a friend of mine. So there's added responsibility of, okay, well, you've given me the job of playing your husband, and there's like extra respect on top of it. And I did have to have a conversation early on with Jason and with Lauren about, am I Daniel Day-Lewising this thing? Right? Like, am I walking, talking Nathan, or am I just playing a character, which is Nathan, versus playing Nathan, right? And they made it very clear to me that, no, this is a character we are creating. That is Nathan, but you don't need to. At the same time, Lauren writes the way he talks. And also Nathan and I do have similar speech patterns, which is weird. So there are some similarities you will see between the real man and me that are the product of her writing and the weird idiosyncrasies that two eccentric Jews happen to.
Perfect kismet. Sounds like you were born for this moment right here, this role, embodying another person that is a friend. Lauren, what was it? I mean, you started to talk about it a little bit, but what was it like to sort of dig into the world of your husband's work and all the intimacy that sort of goes with there? What were the challenges and what were the positives that came out of it?
Well, I would say everyone should write a play about their partner.
I will get right on that. Thank you. Any tips I'll take too.
Or you're responsible if and when it happens. You're responsible.
Write responsibly.
Yes.
But what it actually ended up doing was me interviewing Nathan kind of in my best NPR voice. And there's hours of transcribed interviews that I had, just kind of sitting my phone down on, putting it on record, sitting it down and having dinner and saying, okay, so when you were 15, and it's a very interesting thing because like sometimes you go through that when you date and either you forget or you never asked, or the questions you would ask now are very different than the ones you would ask when you were dating.
Mhm.
And so it was kind of like dating all over. It was very funny. But in a very kind of, I had my own version of a lot of the events in the play as his partner, what that was like from my perspective, but I didn't have what was internally going on in his brain all the time. And that was the kind of box we were opening and exploring together, which is pretty brave of him, I must admit, to have the whole thing must have been very odd.
Mhm.
And he has sort of said as much, but the play I wrote right before the pandemic happened was the Half-Life of Marie Curie. So he has a good company in terms of scientists that I've written plays about. She's pretty good. It's pretty good company to be
Good
in.
company.
So I think he felt safe to know, and he knows my work very well. And so he knows that I treat science with reverence and want to make sure that everything scientifically is accurate and done with intentionality. And that meant that at times, the first version that I had wrote of how he thinks about, say, the tree of life and viruses place or not place in that tree, and are viruses alive or not, my explanation based on listening to him, I was like, oh, great, this is great. And he was like, okay, we got to change this. So he came in and was like, it's more like this. It's less like this and more
He
like.
sort of is like the research dramaturg, inaccurate, not happening.
Yeah, he was our scientific consultant as much as he was the subject of the dang play. So that was double duty. But it really was a really interesting examination of what was most important to him. And a lot of it is very clear to me. A lot of what he took out was the human-centric ideology that a lot of, frankly, non-scientists approach. Like, oh, evolution basically is driving to and peaks at humans. And he was like, that's not true. Humans are very accidental and very minimal in the whole scope of things. There's much more viruses and certainly much more bacteria and even more like ants on Earth than there are people. So it's stuff like that of going, oh, that's great. You're right. I was doing that. And he kind of checking these things that I, as a playwright, who my work is all about people. So it's no kind of surprise that I was driving towards the humanity of things. And he was like, that is the opposite of what I do, which was a great education in my own spouse and a great, this is just endlessly fascinating.
Yet the whole piece becomes so humanistic because of all the approach that you took and the details and his thinking, right? Like you get to see his thinking. And in this one human moment, you're like, oh, right, of course, it's way more complex than the simplification than we tend to offer.
I like to
awesome.
think, I write a lot of plays about science and thinkers, and every idea has humanity behind it. What was that humanity? What was going on in their life that had nothing to do with this pattern breaking idea? What were they holding inside of them? What pain, what trauma, what joy? Were they managing, as well as coming up with theory of relativity, et cetera, et cetera. there's
no big feat
in a person, right? And
yeah.
all the humans, whether scientists or great artists, are dealing with the same heartbreak and triumph as everybody else.
So true. Is there anything else you want to share? I know William, you spoke a little bit, but both of you, is there anything else you want to share about the process for rehearsals and filming? I mean, this is a completely unprecedented time, right? And changed the face of theater and may change it forever moving forward in many ways. And as somebody who's been on this side of the planning and the problem solving and the figuring out what to do in these moments, I recognize and acknowledge the incredible feat it was to create this beautiful cinematic play. And kudos go to the Marin Theater Company and Roundhouse as well, who filmed this world premiere and commissioned it. But yeah, I'm just curious if there's any other things that stood out to you as like lessons learned or surprises or like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're doing this during this time.
Well, one thing that jumps to mind, and then I'd be way more curious about what Bill has to say, but Zoom taught us all to look at the camera. And in our play, the first thing our character does is open his eyes and he's looking at the camera, which is, for anyone who's at any film training, that's the last thing you're supposed to do. Like, you've messed up the take if you look in the eye of the, the
Right,
camera.
right.
So we were like, can you buck all of your training, please, fancy actor, and please do the thing you're not
Look at the little dot. Yeah.
little dot. But in some ways, you know, that's what I kept thinking is how are we, like, the world broke, so let's break all the other rules. And in some ways, the play, we broke rules of theater, we broke rules of film, and we mashed them together into this thing that both belongs on film and on stage, and kind of defies every category. But I think that's what humans and certainly artists do, is to say, let's make a new thing. So no one's done it before. Great. That's great news. we will do it. So I was quite thrilled. And the truth is, I was never in the same room with Bill or the team. I only came in and shot one little scene at the very end of the process after everyone had basically left. So I was on Zoom the whole time. So what a strange thing to premiere and work and write a new play, and I'm not even in the same room. It's just was bananas, but also that's what we were in. So what was it like for you, Bill?
I disagree with Lauren. Zoom has taught us to look in the camera, but most of us don't. You know, I'm always like, do I look weird? Oh, Lauren's hair is pretty. Oh, I'm gonna watch Danielle talk. I don't know her. It'd be cool to get to know her. And I should be here, right? Because you feel a connection there. So it's taught me to look in the camera, but I don't. I have ADD. But she is very much correct in that, yeah, as someone who occasionally works in television and film, you look in the camera 95% of the time and you ruined it. So unless you're Fran Drescher. So yeah, I've been watching The Nanny. What are you gonna do? It's a great show. So I did learn, though, that the camera can be my friend. I'm not good in front of a still camera, but it's similar device, especially digitally, right? So I found in that empty theater, actually looking in the camera, once I got over the initial don't do it, that was my friend, right? That was the thing to avoid and the thing to give me comfort, depending on the moment. And that became the character, and I think that helped the performance. What else? I learned how to rehearse differently. A working smarter, not harder type of thing. It may be a little, for lack of, sorry about the cliche, but it may be a little inside baseball. But when you're in a rehearsal process, and Lauren's heard this spiel before, there's generally always a part in the rehearsal process where someone is marking something, right? It's not exactly going through the motions, but it's definitely not doing it full out. And sometimes it's very much justified, right? Sometimes it's not, but sometimes you just have to do a version of the thing to get through it. We never did that. I didn't see any point in not rehearsing all out, because it's not like I had a co-star who needed time to work. And what that resulted in, I think, was because our time in the theater was cut. We were supposed to have 2 weeks in the theater. We only ended up having 5 days to stage, rehearse, block, shoot, the whole thing. And because we had rehearsed so diligently, that was my anchor, my crutch, the thing to keep me honest, the thing to fall back on when I felt like I was floundering. It goes back to the old Allen Iverson thing, for those who followed basketball in the 90s. He was like, practice, it's just practice. But practice is how you get to Carnegie Hall. See the mixing metaphors? It's great. With symbols or anecdotes, or all three. So those are some of the things I learned, And
did you stop and start like we would in film, as opposed to playing all the way through in a performance?
This is the secret that not everyone knows. So, gather around, children. When we filmed the thing, we never ran it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done this play on stage, off book, all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The only all the ways throughs we had were in Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
in my little company housing, right? Feeling very alone in the woods, away from my wife, away from everyone, even the people who were putting me up, I couldn't see them. Super weird. So what we did was we would shoot scene one, and then we'd shoot it from a different angle and different angle and different angle. And then we'd shoot like the transition into two, and then we'd shoot scene one through scene two. And that's how we did it. We wanted to get a whole run through, but I think we got what we needed. And there was something I wanted to say to the question you asked a minute ago. I think our show is still one of the best versions of the new theater thing that we're trying to do as a result of this. And
Agreed.
thank you. And what I think is great, and I hope that every theater, from the Winter Garden to San Diego Rep to the Wagon Wheel Playhouse, does this, because you can make theater a lot more accessible to people that want to go but can't, or to people that don't think theater is for them. Right. There's no reason that the next time Denzel Washington does something on Broadway, he can't do one performance like this. Right. So anyway.
Love it. Lobbying to change the face of theater forever. Does anybody in our world that is with us have a question that they want to share? Either raise your hand or put your question in the chat. I'll give you a second to think about it. If you have anything. Somebody has something. Jane. There's no weird questions, Jane. Do you have a tagline for this play? I want to spread the word, but just catastrophist at this particular time in history, especially in this town, seems to put people off. I'm in Maryland and I go to Roundhouse quite a bit, and I would love to tagline to let people know how great the show is. So is there something she suggests? Science and spirituality and virology, for example. But is there a tagline that you tend to use?
I literally will have to go to the website. And I mean, what you said, Danielle, to intro was gorgeous. Use that. Whatever.
Very nice.
So good. The surprises that you discover about your own family, or the coming viruses. It's very hard. It's almost impossible for a playwright to tagline their own show, because it's about so many things that I'm like, I can't boil it down.
But boil it down, right?
That's why other people do it.
Jane, you can go to our website. Pretty much, I sort of pulled the magical words from there. So hopefully something will inspire you there.
Sorry, none of us are good at elevator pitches. We need to get better, but none of us are good at the elevator pitch.
I have Michael who asked, what's your next project that you guys are working on?
Lauren?
Well, because the world shut down and a lot of theater was pushed and canceled or postponed, this next year is going to be quite busy because all of those shows are now happening. So I have a play premiering at Marin Theater Company this fall, which was canceled from 2020 and now gets to take up. It's the third in our trilogy that I've co-written with Margot Melkon. We've taken the Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice characters and given them kind of holiday Christmas rom-com stories. So we've done Miss Bennet, the Wickhams, and then this final one that we're premiering is called Georgiana and Kitty. And so it's just absolute delight, brainy women and their sisters falling in and out of love. It's just absolute heaven. And then next year I have three entire musicals that are all premiering. Like,
oh my gosh, that's insane. One at a time is big enough, but three.
Yes. So there's one. Yes, there's one called Justice, which is about the unique kind of sisterhood and friendship between Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That's a 3-person musical, which is very rare. Usually musicals are very big. So we decided, well, let's go very small and see what happens. That one's really great. We're working with Sandra Day O'Connor's estate and her sons. And so it's going to be a really special thing. That one's premiering at Arizona Theater Company. Right after that, like literally one closes and the other one goes into rehearsal, is a new musical about the first Congresswoman in American history, true story. It's also about the 19th Amendment and the continued fight for voting rights and voting access across the nation. It is called We Won't Sleep, and it is premiering at Signature Theater in the spring. And then I have a UK musical that's kind of pre-West End that we're doing in the fall, so it's a little busy, but luckily I love what I do, so we'll make it work.
Excellent. The literary manager in me is like, these sound like San Diego Rep possible shows. I'll have to knock on your door for that.
Indeed. Certainly, I mean, all of them are, but Justice is like made for theater companies that don't always do musicals, but sometimes do, so yeah, we'll talk.
All right. Bill, what are you up to?
Oh, what am I up to? Well, yeah, as the world is restarting, it's time to like figure things out. So, fortunately, thus far I can say always voiceover stuff. So if you're an audiobook person, there's audiobook stuff out there. I can get into it or not, but it's there. And there's actually the book that just got released called The Sweetness of Water. It's a debut novel by a gentleman named Nathan Harris from Ashland, Oregon, strangely enough. And that's Oprah's book of the month. So
congrats.
Audiobook, and I'm proud of my work on that book. Yeah. So there's that. I narrate journalism for an app called Autumn and also for Apple Plus News sometimes. I am trying to restart my one-man show that I mentioned earlier called Origin Stories. I'm looking for a home for that. I have an animated pilot that I'm trying to shop around. So if anyone knows anyone in animation, holla at me. I'm waiting to hear if the flight attendant is going to bring me back for season 2. And I just shot a small role in a Netflix Christmas film called The Noel Diary, starring Justin Hartley from This Is Us. So hoping to not be edited out of it. And, because that can happen and they don't have to tell you. And then you show up at the premiere, or you tell your friends to watch.
Yeah.
Where is it? There's an episode of Friends, actually, where that happens to Joey. My wife's always watching Friends, so that's in my brain. I think, and then Lauren and I are trying to make up some stuff. So I think that's it.
That is way plenty for both of you. That is amazing. All the juice is flowing. That's awesome. Another question. In the show, oh shoot, my question just moved. In the show, there was a specific portion talking about the devastation of losing livelihoods versus losing lives. So how was that moment impacted you both, knowing that COVID took away a lot of the livelihoods for artists at the time? That's a beautiful question.
I don't think I'm ever not thinking about that. And even in the being able to do some art during this time, as much as I was able to celebrate that and feel so grateful for it, most of the crew that we would usually work with were not there, and our, the designers it was very limited. And so even being able to celebrate, like, yay, see, can't stop theater, when over half of our colleagues across the country are still not working or have any entryway back. So it's a big deal. It's a big issue. And I hope that, when theaters come back, everyone with salaries is very conscious of all the people who aren't and who are temporary. And so we can lift them up and employ them and do all the things that we can. And there was a lot of great organizations, including one who was benefited by this show, which is the Theater Bay Area's Artist Fund, which still is giving grants to artists in the Bay Area. So some of the proceeds for this show went to support them. And yeah, man, it's such a devastation. And we'll come back out of it, but I think there'll be a lot of people who leave the arts. Hopefully they'll come back at some point. I don't know. And I don't think anybody really knows. And we will in a few years know the exact way we got out. but it'll take a lot of audience members like yours and a lot of people doing what they can, both financially and just enthusiastically to help the arts get back.
So true. Go ahead, Bill. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, it was that whole loss of livelihood thing was something that for me, being in New York for a good portion of the pandemic and being in San Diego for a portion of it. In San Diego, you know, if you're not at San Diego Rep or at the Old Globe, it's like there's a lot of the city that doesn't feel like an art city. Do you know what I mean? It's just hanging out at the beach. So sometimes it was easy to not think about it. And then like when you're in New York, you can't not think about it. And the thing that I love the most that I also take for granted when I'm working is the joy of other people. You know, by and large, the people that stick around in this business are great. And they stick around for a reason, you know, because they're creative and they're lovely and they're fun to work with and be around. And very grateful to be in a show, but like very weird to be in a show alone and a one-man show and not have the director in the room for 95% of the time. Yeah. And then as Lauren was saying, but not in these words, you know, usually I always tell, I do a lot of like teaching and mentoring, and I always tell my people that one person's success is not your failure. That's easier to say than to always bear in mind. And it's very easy to look at like the name brand people that I know and consider myself lesser than, but I've been really fortunate to work a lot over the last few years. And that puts me in a very small group of actors. Most actors are unemployed most of the time. So there was a lot of survivor's guilt, actually, because I talked to friends of mine who maybe I think are better than me, or certainly who have more experience than me, or the same amount of training and the same amount of experience, and they're not working and they have no prospect of working. And they're, you know, I mean, my mental health suffered a lot, right? But it was great that they were supportive of me doing the show or the voiceovers or whatever, but it was sometimes hard to talk about, you know, but it was wonderful to work on something so meaningful and so relevant and so personal and so unique. And so I think trailblazing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I appreciate your candid answers and your honesty. You guys are like so open. It's beautiful. It reminds me of a question. The other question that was just asked reminds me of a question that I was sort of holding on to, which Lauren, I want to ask you first, because I noticed your website claims that you are, right, it names you as playwright, screenwriter, and feminist. So I'm wondering how those three things kind of intersect with each other. And also on top of that, I'm sort of thinking of our entry back as like American Theater 2.0, right? Like we've gone through this sort of refresh, hitting the refresh button. And so in terms of reflecting on how the arts have shifted, how equity, diversity, inclusion is being put at the forefront. How do you reflect on all of that, being the playwright, screenwriter, and feminist that you are?
Yeah, what a fabulous question, and so important. I am so grateful to be at this moment in time where we get to tell stories intentionally and affirmatively and diversely. And if that means that my play doesn't get chosen because of somebody whose voice we don't see in the American theater, that is the best news I've had in my career. So I think there's so much room. We have to remove this scarcity mentality. There's not enough for everyone. Yes, there is. It's art. There's more stories, and the more stories, the better. So I think that's part of the EDI part of it that is most exciting to me. And I think there's a lot of versions of that as well. And you know, even our play is one of them. There's a lot of people who perhaps would not have thought to cast Bill in this role about a Jewish man who in reality is not Black, but why not? Bill is the exact right person for this role and is an incredible talent and brings his Judaism with him, as well as his Blackness. So it's just, it's great. So I try to do all the things that I can to do that, including in some of the more traditional roles that, the Jane Austen-y ones I was mentioning. In every version of that, the casting suggestion intention at the very top says, please cast diversely. Jane Austen should be accessible to everybody. So even little things like that may not seem like a massive deal, it just reminds casting directors, oh, right, this doesn't have to be all white. Great news. Now we're talking about wage equity, and now we're talking about job equity, and that's where we should be. So I certainly have all of those things in mind. And, I feel like that little tag on my website it's a little bit of my Beyonce moment when she was the feminist behind her. I feel like that was such a turning point in our ability to claim titles and to say intersectional feminist or Black Lives Matter or any version of these things. And that's good. That's good. It's not being too woke. It's not being too out there. It's not being too mouthy or whatever. It's a true statement. And it undergirds, if you read even 2 of my plays, you would see that, like, well, obviously she's a feminist. This is not a secret. So being able to claim those names, I think, helps other people claim the parts of them that they can name in that way, should they choose. So that's part of what I'm always thinking about. As we come back, look, does theater, I will challenge Shakespeare or Shakespeare's character in Dear Hamlet. It doesn't have to, we don't have to be a mirror to nature. Theater isn't a mirror up to nature. It should be a telescope. It should be a microscope. It should be a lens. It should make us see further and different and clearer, not here's exactly where you are right now. Like, no, so if we can't do it in theater, we can't do it. Certainly can't do it in politics. We can't do it in the environment. So the theater is, to me, the place. It's our lab. It's our place to do these thought experiments and to lift people up and to create a new look for the world, or the world, reflect and amplify the world we want to see. So I certainly think that every play has a bit of activism, if not a lot of activism to it. And that's exactly what theater should be doing.
I love that theater as lab idea. And also appreciate all the plays that you write that have such strong women and are looking at and explaining people from history, or, re-examining characters that we sort of know and embodying them today. And so I'm always appreciative of seeing those reflected on the stage. So thank you. And Bill, I slipped right into calling you Bill. I hope that's okay. Bill, I want to ask you too about the American 2.0 question in terms of, your reflection. But also I noticed this is my total geeky self. I noticed on your website that it said that your dad was a jazz guitarist. And so I started wondering if you have any sort of reflection on jazz and acting in terms of like similarities between the two, because I love jazz as well. So I have both of those questions for you.
So I'll do the 2.0 and then I'll do the jazz. So in the last few years, I hate using this phrase, but I'm gonna use it. I feel like I've come into my power a lot in terms of asserting myself and asking for what I need. And to some extent, like what I've earned and what I've deserved. And what I've tried to do more recently is, whatever room I'm in, be a voice for those who aren't being heard. To me, that sounds like so fucking sanctimonious, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm much better at the advocacy and the justice stuff on the micro, like in the productions that I'm in, to make sure that shit is on the level, to make sure that the voices that need to be in the room are in the room. I was recently brought on as a cultural consultant for a project in New York, and that was the first time I've been professionally approached to do that. So I guess that's an indication that I'm on the right track. I would like to learn how to do that on a broader scope. I think EDI training is great in theory. Unfortunately, the majority of it that I've been exposed to has not been great in practice. And I'm not going to like shit on people right now, but I will say that some of the people out there who are doing most of the teaching should not be. So maybe that's a space that I can enter. I don't know. I'm going to take the lead from my wife on that because she's been doing a lot. So there's that. Yeah. But I think honestly, if everyone kind of stepped up in the room, we wouldn't have to have these conversations as much or at all. Right. You know, I'm in that weird middle generation, right? Where like shit was starting to change a little bit when we got in the business, but it was still a lot of this is just how it is, like the Scott Rudin type of crap.
Right.
And we just accepted that for whatever reason. You know, for me, it was probably because, you know, I was like a black kid from the Bronx, so who the fuck's gonna listen to me, right? But now I don't need the job that bad. So anyway, I could go on and on and on and on about that. As far as the jazz thing goes, my joke is that I blame my dad for this because I have these fuzzy memories of being like 5 and perched up on a bar stool in Harlem at like 11 o'clock at night, being serenaded by a much older woman and being very uncomfortable. But I grew up around performance and yeah, everywhere I go, oh no, I think that's my father-in-law. Everywhere I go, collaboration is like the most important thing to me. I mean, part of the reason I went to Yale Drama School is because the hallmark of Yale is collaboration. And jazz is, I think, the most collaborative of popular music forms. So yeah, that's what I like about acting, you know, and you got to learn the instrument before you can kind of freestyle. And that's something that I didn't know when I was younger. And that's why I went to grad school. And now I think I know the instrument. So.
And thank you for the like ding dong improv there. That was great.
Oh, I love improv.
Thank you. That was a beautiful answer. Hey, would anybody else like to ask any other questions before we end? Being mindful of time so that I don't take up too much of everybody's. But if there are last minute burning questions, I'll leave a moment for the chat to appear.
Oh, thank you, Jane. You are welcome.
Or if anybody else wants to put up their little blue hand or pop on the screen, you're welcome to do that too. You guys have been so generous with your sharing tonight. I would be surprised if anybody had any other things left to think about. But people surprise me. That's the way it goes. It seems like not though, which is still awesome and amazing because I think you answered so much of what everybody's wondering about. And thank you. Lots of thank yous. Yes, and that is my cue to say thank you so much for sharing your time, your thoughts, and being so vulnerable in this space with us. It was a pleasure from my standpoint to get to know you guys a little better, and hopefully we can keep connecting on some of these amazing projects that you guys described. And I know the folks in this chat who haven't seen the show should, so go to sandiegorep.org before the end of July 11th, and you guys can sign up to stream the show. It's on demand, so you can do it on your time, which is beautiful. Yeah, so.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for your advocacy.
Thank you, San Diego Rep audience.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Pleasure.